What's up, friends? It's me, Arik, and I am back with my phone ringing. Who is calling me at 9 o'clock at night in Massachusetts? What kind of jerk?
It's Nebraska. Pick up the phone. It's Matt Rule. He's ready to talk to you.
Matt, looking forward to seeing what you're doing this year with the boys, Matt.
Who's going to catch the ball in this offense? Can Jeff Sims actually complete a pass 10 yards down the field?
Yeah, I don't know, man. But he got the hype originally as a freshman. I was like, he was really good, But, I don't know. Hendon Hooker became good in his 5th year and got drafted. So
Hey. Hendon Hooker was good in his 4th year, too.
Kyle, how you doing? How you feeling about the rest of the Big Ten here? Are you fired up?
My teams suck. I'm just gonna say it. My teams are not good.
Yeah, we spent all the good money last week
on Ohio State. Yeah.
Ohio State, and it was kind of all you had that was good, actually, right? You had that, and then a bunch of nonsense.
Indiana.
Wait,
yeah.
Wisconsin, man. Wisconsin's fun. They're gonna throw the ball.
We'll see if they can figure it out in year 1.
I really like Mordecai. So, all right. Anyways, where do you want to start, man? You're the captain. Take the ship out of port. Yeah,
we'll start with the Boilermakers. We'll really push the engine towards the finish line here today with Purdue. Jeff Brom leaves Purdue to go to his alma mater of the University of Louisville, and Purdue, in his stead, hires Ryan Walters, who is a defensive-minded guy, so not really going to be involved in the offense. We don't care about Ryan Walters. But at OC, they hire Graham Harrell. Graham Harrell is a air raid disciple, a former Washington State wide receivers coach behind Mike Leach. After that, he took over as the OC at North Texas and then moved on to the OC at USC, and then last season was the offensive coordinator at West Virginia. He's had some decent production in terms of CFF. At USC, obviously they had good wide receivers, but he did use them well, and guys like Drake London, Amon-Ra St. Brown, etc. Usually does all right at the QB position. He's going to throw the ball. He's not going to run often, so plenty of passing volume, even if it's not far down the field. Running backs are all right. Guys who catch passes at the running back position will be worth something in PPR in an air raid system, just like always. And then tight end, not really a thing. Air raids tend to not use that position. Graham Harrell's air raid is no different. And then for Harrell, this type of air raid that he runs, it's pretty simple. Lots of mesh, lots of stuff like that. It does well against bad teams and tends to do very poorly against good teams, which is kind of helpful for CFF. We know which weeks a team like Purdue is going to do well and which weeks they're going to suck. They're not going to do anything against Michigan, not going to do anything against Ohio State or anybody like that. But, the non-con schedule is probably going to be good for Purdue for CFF. But now moving on to the players. Aiden O'Connell heads to the NFL, so they bring in a transfer to replace him, and that will be Hudson Card transferring in from Texas. I believe he was the QB2 last year behind Quinn Ewers at Texas. Correct me if I'm wrong. It might have been Murphy, but I don't know.
No, yeah, he was ahead of Malik. So
yeah. He's a guy who has had some talent, it looks like. Just keeps getting passed over at Texas, though. It's always kind of the two. I see some potential here. He's a guy who's going to attempt a lot of passes, like I said, has some talent. So Card is a guy to watch. A lot of people seem to be in on him here at Purdue. And then at running back, the big returner is Devin Mockabee, who last year as a redshirt freshman put up 968 rushing yards on 195 attempts with 9 rushing touchdowns and caught 32 passes for 274 yards. A guy who's catching 32 passes in a Jeff Brom offense will probably catch about 60 in an air raid offense. So, Maccabees, I think, is a very important name to watch if you're playing PPR CFF. He is kind of a smaller back. I mean, he's 6'200", which is all right, but it's definitely not a big body type back. He's definitely more of a satellite speedster type guy, although not to the extreme level. And then they have another running back behind him, Dylan Downing, who is more of the big guy. He is 6'225" and a senior. I'd expect him to get some goal line work, maybe fill in for Mockabee if Mockabee were to get injured, but not super interesting. He had 351 yards and 4 touchdowns last year. So not a guy I'm looking to roster, but a name to watch if Mockabee were to go down. And then at the wide receiver position, everything seems to be pretty wide open at Purdue. I mean, Charlie Jones moves on to the NFL. Tight end Payne Durham also goes to the NFL. Tyrone Tracy, who was their wide receiver 2 or 3 last season, has now moved to running back. So he's semi-interesting as a running back. I mean, I would have preferred if he was playing wide receiver in this offense, but maybe he catches some passes out of the backfield. I don't know. So, yeah, not a lot of returning production at Purdue at the wide receiver position. And they brought in some transfers. Well, really one big transfer, and that was Jamal Idreen out of FAU, who really impressed people at camp. I mean, he was a guy who had 40 receptions for 570 yards and 6 touchdowns last year at FAU. Looked to be the guy in Purdue's spring and summer practices, and he is now out for the season, though. So Jamal Idreen not going to be a CFF guy for this year. I kind of think there might be some Devy there, at least a little bit, like a round 3 or like a day 3 type guy in the future. I mean, he's 6'3", 210. Assuming he gets a medical waiver for missing this entire season, he'll have 2 years of eligibility next year. So he's a redshirt junior. So maybe a name to watch in the future. Obviously not going to see the field this year. But of the guys who are going to see the field this year, the guy who has the most returning production looks to be the guy you want if you want a wide receiver on Purdue is TJ Sheffield. He's a redshirt senior slot wide receiver at 5'11", 190 pounds. He had 56 receptions, 560 yards, and 8 touchdowns as the wide receiver 2 to Charlie Jones last year. I mean, I can talk myself into TJ Sheffield as a CFF option, especially in an offense that I think is going to throw the ball a lot. He's in the slot, which tends to do well in an air raid offense. So I like TJ Sheffield a little bit. Other guys who are expected to start are Mershawn Rice, who is a redshirt senior, 6'2", 205, 17 receptions, 227 yards, and a touchdown last year. This is just kind of a guy who's a redshirt senior, so that gets you something. I mean, he's older than everybody and probably more athletic, so Mershawn Rice will probably be the wide receiver 2. And then looking at, beats and like projected depth charts, Abdur Rahman Yassin is the 3rd wide receiver on the field. He is a redshirt junior. Last season, he had 2 receptions for 13 yards on 12 targets. I don't understand how a guy like that is listed as a starter, but that's just to show you how paper thin the Purdue wide receiver room really is. And then there's probably 2 or 3 guys who weren't listed as starters on projected depth charts. I think they're a little interesting. One of those is a guy who transferred in from Auburn last year, Elijah Canyon. He is super fast and actually pretty big for a speedster type wide receiver. If he gets on the field, it's something to watch. I mean, last year I think he played 1 receiving snap at all and didn't get a target. So, but he seems to be impressing the new coaching staff. I mean, Elijah Canyon I think there's big potential if he's actually on the field, just because of the type of wide receiver he is. But I don't really see it. And then Curtis DeVille is a guy that, I mean, a few of us in like this community tended to like as a wide receiver prospect last year. I mean, not super hyped by the 24/7 guys. He was a wide receiver 50 in last year's class, a low 4-star. He's 6'1", 180, and just a great athlete, like super fast, like a 90th percentile speed type athlete. But he was injured last season and missed all of the year. So it'll be interesting to see if Curtis DeVille can come back and make a splash. He hasn't really gotten any hype at all. Things have been pretty quiet on that front, but he's a guy who some people had hopes for last season. So maybe coming off injury, he can make something happen.
I did see one beat report or whatever that was like, a coach mentioned Curtis DeVille. Don't forget about him. We're excited to have him back. But
yeah. I wonder if he's still missing some time, just still rehabbing or something. I don't know.
If I recall, I mean, God, the number of camp reports I read, but I remember it was like, he's going to be back, and we're excited to have him back. But I obviously didn't make spring camp, so like, what is there to report at this point? You know?
Yeah, exactly. And then they bring in a freshman who is a 4-star, another low 4-star. Armand Branch, the wide receiver 41 on 247. I don't really have much on him other than that he is the wide receiver 41 on 247.
Somebody liked him.
But yeah, like I said, tight end not really going to be a big thing in this new offense. So no tight ends of note at Purdue, I believe.
Yeah. All right. I think Maccabee's like the returning RB13 by points per game. That's almost exactly where I kind of like intuitively wanted to put him. I don't know if that sounds right to you.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk myself into a jump, but I like that.
I mean, I like everyone ahead of him quite a bit. So, but yeah, I mean, if he has a Max Borghi-esque season, then we will be, he'll be a top 5 guy, but everyone ahead of him should score a lot. Hudson Card, I don't know. I mean, if they do air raid it and they're successful, he's going to throw the ball 500 times, right? I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, if the thing is, though, like if Byron Brown starts at USF, they're also going to throw the ball 500 times. I mean,
I could see him as low as Chandler Morris, but I couldn't get on board with him really being much further behind that. I guess I could. Will Howard. I don't know.
Yeah, Will Howard, Brett Gabbert, Carter Bradley's going to throw the ball a lot. I don't know.
I'm fine with him anywhere higher than Malik Wernsby and David Jackson, Chandler Rogers, but that was my first thought was.
I think it's fair to have him above McCarthy.
Yeah, it's got to be ahead of McCarthy.
Yeah, I think behind Hennigan.
Yeah, I don't know why we have Howard behind McCarthy either. Howard doesn't have upside, but he's like a lock for like 21 or 22 points a game. But all right. And then the only wide receiver I ranked for CFF was Sheffield.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, the rest of the room is pretty up in the air.
All right. So. We're on to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So my first team is my holdover from our previous session that we held off on because we talked about Ohio State for an hour. That would be Minnesota. Minnesota. That's Joe Biden. Which, like, I want to be more excited for Minnesota. The coach has said they're going to throw the ball more. I mean, same coaching staff that we saw make Dylan Bell a thing. David Bell a thing, right? No, he was from, right?
I think you're right, yeah. And Tyler Johnson.
And Tyler Johnson, right? So we know he's willing to do it when he has the personnel. He hasn't thrown the ball in a couple of years because you got Mo Ibrahim, who was an extremely talented college back, obviously good enough to get himself drafted.
Despite injuries.
Despite an Achilles tear, right? Like that's about as bad as it gets. So, I mean, I think the easy thing to be excited about for CFF, for C2C, on the college side for Minnesota is the running back room. I mean, we have recent history of them just running the ball at extreme volume and doing it effectively. Ibrahim's gone. Potts, who was his backup last year, also gone.
For some reason.
Sophomore Zach Evans popped off a little bit in limited work last year. I think we both like him quite a bit. He was 4.8 a carry in relief. He was the spring game MVP, went 13 for 110. He's 5'10", he's 205. He's big enough. Could he be a Devy guy? Sure, why not? I mean, I don't think we know either way right now. He hasn't done anything to tell me he's not. He's big enough. So, why not? And he's cheap where he's been available in supplementals. He's been very overlooked. Freshman Darius Taylor was the more highly recruited of the two and also has played well, with 7 for 48 and 1 in the spring game. It's about the same size. There's probably some kind of committee unless really one guy separates himself, which I do think is going to happen. I mean, I think that's what what's the coach's name?
PJ Fleck.
Yeah, I think that's what Fleck wants to do. I think he wants a workhorse. He doesn't really, even when we saw Ibrahim get hurt, like Potts was the workhorse, and then Potts got hurt, and someone else came in and took 20 carries. I think that's what he wants to do. He wants a guy. The only real, trouble in the waters there for these two is that transfer Sean Tyler from Western Michigan is also a good running back. He has 2,000-yard seasons under his belt. Sure, in the MAC, but they're still 1,000-yard seasons. He's a little bit undersized at 185 pounds, but I mean, he's the experienced guy. I don't know. Some coaches want the guy with experience out there because he's not going to fumble in the fourth quarter, right? So we'll see how that plays out. But in the most recent wave of things I read, really sounded like it's going to be Zach Evans getting the first crack, which I'm pretty stoked about. I got a couple of shares. I wish I had a couple of more. Quarterback is like maybe the big problem for the Gophers. And as much as the staff is telling me in words they want to throw more, they're not showing me that in actions by having a quarterback competition by Ethan Kalimakis and Cole Kramer. So Kaliakmanis, I'm bad with that. Kaliakmanis is the presumed starter, but Kramer was statistically better in the spring game. So, one rough day doesn't make a season, but I don't think it's a set in stone thing that Kaliakmanis is the guy. I think he's going to be the first guy. What'd you say?
That is the Greek rifle.
Yeah. How dare I scorn his name? But I think he's going to be the first guy. And that's my other fear because I actually like the wide receiver room quite a bit here. Kyle likes it less than me. I know because he hates on my guys. But if the quarterback play is atrocious, it's not going to matter who's out there catching the ball. So, what did I not write about this? Oh, it's up here. So Chris Ottman-Bell, who was supposed to be a thing a couple of years ago, is back. I don't think he's good. I've never thought he was good. He's not crisp. He's not he doesn't do anything special, right? He's a starting college wide receiver, and that's the highest praise he'll get from anyone. Daniel Jackson, who had a little bit of hype behind him as a freshman, is back. He's better than CAB. I will give him that, but I also don't think he's like an NFL guy. I mean, he's certainly a guy that if no one else rises to the top, could get some volume. He's been a downfield guy for them right now, kind of like high yards per catch, but not really being a complete receiver. But I got my money on one of the newcomers there. And I like Elijah Spencer, transfer from Charlotte. He's like prototypical size. He was a freshman All-American. He went for just short of 1,000 last year in a wide receiver room with another talented guy. And spring game, he went 11 catches for 133 yards and a tutty. I don't do a ton of advanced data work when we do these things because it bogs it down, but I did for Spencer. Spencer went for 3.72 yards per route run against man. That is astounding. The only bit of cold water to throw on myself here is that he had a substantially weaker yards per route run against zone, and that's important. Yards per route run against zone is an important part of a Devy wide receiver's profile. So hopefully he can improve on that, but you can teach people to run routes against zone if they can run routes already. It's just, they got to get the feel for finding the soft spot. And good luck finding Elijah Spencer film. There's like 2 clips of him on the internet. It is awful. I tried to find all 22 sharp.
Have you ever watched a live Charlotte football game?
I've not.
I've seen better production quality in high schools.
Yeah. I had a few all 22 games that are like Charlotte's defense against good teams, but they didn't even bother to like package the offense, which made me sad.
It was a good offense.
What's up?
I said I thought it was good offense.
Yeah, I mean the kid graduated this year, right? The quarterback,
Chris Reynolds. Yeah,
he was a good G5 quarterback. He was a great CFF asset, CFF dynasty. So a new name that I wasn't really on that is a potential guy here that the beats were hyping up and actually got like spring game MVP was, I'm going to struggle to say this, Lemike Brockington or maybe Lemike Brockington. He's a redshirt sophomore. And the beats were basically more hyped about him than they were about Spencer, although they were also hyped about Spencer. He went 8 for 181 in the spring game, so that's a pretty high yards per catch there. I mean, that's 20 plus. So that's a deep threat guy that's getting volume. We got spring game, right? The starters probably weren't in the mix, but that's interesting. That's enough for me to pay attention to. And then there's another guy, is Corey Crooms, who came from a MAC team, right?
Western Michigan.
Yeah, he was from Western. Him and Tyler must have kind of buddied up and came over. Crooms was great at Western Michigan, and he's a high volume slot guy. He's probably their slot starter unless they like move Spencer into the slot because they want Jackson and Bell on the outside. But I really think the transfer talent should rise to the top this year over the returning vets on the roster. I mean, I'm not sure how Fleck is about that, but if he wants to win football games, he's going to put the better players out there. So, and that's going to put Spencer and Crooms ahead of some other guys on that team for sure. The other really interesting name, particularly for CFF, is Brevin Spann-Ford, who is really like the highest volume returning receiver on the team. He was 42 for 497 and 2 last year. He should be like, I think everyone's projecting him for substantially more than that, and that's already a decent tight end. You give him 6 touchdowns, 600 yards, he's a top 15 type tight end, and I think that's a realistic or even conservative projection for him this year. That's what I got. What do you got on Minnesota? Anything, Kyle?
It sounds like they sure threw in the spring game, but like this is ridiculous the amount of they did not throw last year. I mean, wide receivers had a combined like 150 targets combined, all of them.
I almost wonder if Tanner Morgan wasn't a little bit nicked up. Or they definitely seemed like they're kind of trying to hide him the past couple of years, and they weren't. I mean, Morgan was the QB for David Bell when he went off, right? I keep saying Bell, but I feel like I'm wrong about that.
No, you are. David Bell is a Purdue guy.
It's a Purdue guy. There's Tyler Johnson. Bateman. Sorry.
Bateman, yeah.
But Morgan was Bateman's QB.
Yeah. I mean, Morgan played 8 games last year, and then Kaliakamakis came in. Kaliakmanis. That's it. Came in.
I think you say it Kaliakmanis, but
I've heard Kaliakmanis. I've heard Kaliakmanis. I think it's either way. There's just no A in between the K and the M is the big thing that I wanted to do. And he was bad. 52% completion percentage. I mean, his attempts were 22, 12, 13, 15, and 29. So they didn't really try to throw the ball with him either.
Yeah, I got something for you, Kyle.
I think Kaliakmanis has like some Devy potential. Like I think there's a ceiling with Kaliakmanis because he does have a big arm. He is.
Did you just say he has Devy potential?
Yeah. No, he is. Like the intangibles are there. He has a big arm. He's a good size. He has some scramble ability.
He's a true sophomore, right?
Yeah, and he's young. I don't see him hitting that ceiling, but I think the ceiling is high.
I mean, even if he turns into a guy that matures in this offense and is okay this year, you could have in CFF Dynasty or C2C like a couple of years of him playing at a high level in the system, running the ball a little bit, and pushing the ball downfield. I mean, Tanner Morgan was a good CFF quarterback when he had Bateman and when he had Tyler Johnson. He was like 22 plus points a game, which is something.
Yeah, I agree. I just think it's hard to kind of guess what they're going to do. Like, are they going to actually throw the ball? I don't know. In the spring game, both those guys having 8 receptions. I mean, that's something. But the spring game's a spring game. Of course, you're going to try to show
one of the
off.
coaches said to a reporter they were going to throw the ball more this year.
Yeah, because coaches never lie. But
well, I mean, they said it and then they actually did it as well. And why isn't Elijah Spencer on the Devy list yet?
Because who cares?
He's good.
Is he better than Trayshawn Holden?
Yes.
Is he?
Yeah. Yes. He's I think he has the potential to be substantially better than all of these guys. I'm just gonna wait until you're talking.
That was
like 10 spots.
Well, that was a red herring because I actually just ranked Corey Crooms. Get wrecked.
Oh,
you didn't expect sneaky. That.
You're so very sneaky.
I'd rather have Corley for sure.
Yeah, but I think that's fair. He's just already done quite a bit, and honestly, the 3.7 yards against man is good. And the few clips I can find of him, he actually has route running ability and savvy. I just don't know how athletic he is. So I think that might prevent him from being a real early round guy. But I think he's very skilled. So
I think that's fair. Do you like where I have him on TFF? I think I ranked him pretty low, but I just don't know if the volume's for sure there. And there's all these other guys.
Be a top 20 guy, but
one of us is losing connection because I did not hear that.
Oh, I said if he becomes the guy there, he could be a top 20 type guy, but we don't know if that's going to be the case, right?
Yeah.
I think
too many guys.
I think so, but it's more of a gut thing than any hard evidence at this point.
I think I personally would rather have I don't know. It's close. I think it's closer to me between him and Crooms than it is to you. But
we'll find out. You know what I mean? I mean, God, for all we know, they're going to throw out Ottman, Bell, Jackson, and Brockington. Like, we just don't know. But the Brockington sounds interesting too.
All right. Well, I'll keep us moving, and I've got another new air raid team in the Big Ten, and that is the one, the only, the Dairy Raid out in Wisconsin. Excited. You know, they're big on their milk. They're big on their cheese up there. So the Dairy Raid in Wisconsin is going to be led by Luke Fickell as head coach and Phil Longo as offensive coordinator. Phil Longo's had great success with some quarterbacks and some wide receivers. He was at UNC back with Sam Howell and now Drake May last season. Before that, he was with Ole Miss with Jordan Ta'amu. I mean, those were CFF guys. I mean, Ta'amu was only like a top 25 guy, but Howell and May were top 10 guys in CFF. So this is a massive upgrade for the passing game. I mean, running backs at UNC weren't really bad. I think he was there for like 1 year of Javonte and Carter, maybe 2. But I mean, after Javonte and Carter, the running backs at UNC were decently bad. So I don't know. Running backs could be all right, but I mean, we know for sure the running back at Wisconsin this year is going to be all right, but in the future, not sure. Kind of a toss-up. But the quarterbacks and wide receivers are going to be much, much better, at least in comparison to Wisconsin's history. And coming in, this is a team that really hit the transfer portal hard. I mean, a new head coach, new offensive coordinator, you kind of got to do that, especially when you want to implement a new system. They push Graham Mertz out. They bring in Tanner Mordecai. He will lead the passing attack at quarterback. He is more than good enough. He was a Oklahoma commit back in 2018. I believe a pretty highly rated recruit, at least decently highly rated. Was the backup or QB3 at Oklahoma for 3 seasons and then transferred to SMU in the 2021 season and started immediately at SMU, where he completed 67.5% of his passes for 3,623 yards, 39 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions in 2021. A little bit worse in 2022 with 64% completion percentage, 3,268 yards, and just 31 touchdowns. So, you know, you go down 8 touchdowns. Who cares if you're still over 30? So now he grad transfers to Wisconsin. I mean, I think the CFF potential is definitely there. I know Arik has hinted at it. I'm not sure if that was before or after we started recording, but we like Mordecai.
I think that kid likes to sling it down the field, and he has the arm to do it. And he still has a good completion percentage. I mean, I think they're going to really – and I think the wide receivers are underrated, but I'll let you get into that.
Yeah, and I think Mordecai's a sneaky Devy guy. I mean, he's the type of guy who, like, if he goes off in the system and gets 3,600 yards again, or even more than that, possibly. I mean, he's gonna go to the NFL, like a Bailey Zappi type. Maybe there's something, I don't know. I'm not.
I'd rather have him than Austin Reed, I think.
I don't. I like Reed a lot.
I know, but I just don't think he's an NFL guy.
I think right above Finn, below Warner. It's very good. And then they also –
Go ahead.
Wisconsin also brought in another quarterback transfer, and I think this one is less important to CFF, at least for this year, obviously, since Mordecai will be the starter. But I think it's a bigger CFF or Devy deal, and that is second-year quarterback Nick Evers will transfer in from Oklahoma. He was the QB 8 in last year's class, according to 24/7. I think this is a good play for the future. If you can get Nick Evers, you can probably get him for really cheap. So I think he can be interesting next year. And then Braylon Allen at running back is the big name in this offense. Obviously, you've already ranked him second overall on the running back list in Devy. I think that's very fair. He is an absolute unit. He is 6'2", 245 pounds. Just destroys people. Has been since he was 17 years old as a true freshman. He has 2 straight 1,000-yard seasons now. In his freshman year, he took 186 carries and turned them into 1,268 yards and 12 touchdowns. And then last year, a little bit less efficient. Still had those 1,200 yards, but did it on 230 carries and turned it into 11 touchdowns. He's a guy who obviously has NFL size, 6'2", 245 pounds, but more of like a Derrick Henry size. And in this air raid offense, he might get tasked with trying to catch some passes. I mean, if a guy like that can develop at least somewhat as a quote-unquote route runner, I mean, you just got to get really good at that little quick route, and get some soft hands, then I think we're talking about a guy who's going to be really, really impressive to NFL scouts if he can do that. And then there's not really much behind him. Nobody really worth talking about, I think. So we'll move on to the wide receiver room, and this is a room that brought in a ton of transfers. I mean, they bring in 4 transfers into Wisconsin. 2 guys follow Luke Fickell from Cincinnati. Those are Quincy Burrows and Will Pauling. Neither of them did much at Cincinnati, but Will Pauling has been a darling of the coaching staff once he got on campus at Wisconsin. He seems to be winning the slot role over returner Skylar Bell, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal because OC Phil Longo in a recent interview said, "I told my wife, I think the thing I love the most after you and my kids are slot wide receivers. They are typically one of the most productive positions in my offense." So if Will Pauling is really going to win that slot role, that's a big deal for CFF. I mean, thinking back to UNC, Phil Longo had Josh Downs, obviously, for the last couple of years. Before that, it was
Diami, but
Daz
he played outside.
Newsome and Diami Brown.
Yeah, Newsome was good too, though, but Diami was the more productive guy. I think he was like a Z, like an off ball.
Yeah, I think they kind of both switched in and out, if I remember correctly.
They did, yeah.
And Pauling is 5'10", 186. I mean, has decent speed, not really productive, but gained a 69.4 receiving grade on PFF, which isn't great, but it's good. So if he's improving, it could be an interesting player to watch. And then also transferring in Oklahoma State's Bryson Green. I believe he's a 5th or 6th year senior. He was recruited by Phil Longo at Ole Miss back when he was there in like 2018. And then once again recruited by Phil Longo to go to UNC the first time Bryson Green entered the transfer portal. Just kind of didn't work out for that connection in the past, and now they're finally together in Wisconsin. Bryson Green is 6'2", 215 pounds, tons of muscle on his frame. I mean, he's just going to bully DBs. I'm not convinced he's a starter, but I could see it. I think it's between him and the USC transfer CJ Williams for the 3rd spot in this offense. CJ Williams was a 4-star prospect and the wide receiver 7 in last year's class. He also has a big frame, also shows good burst. He's not going to beat anybody fast in a race, but he breaks really quickly and gets out of those breaks quickly. Although one thing to note was last year at USC, he was a year 1-0. I tend to think that's a big deal. Some people will argue against me, but I think he had 4 catches last year as a true freshman. So obviously USC has a good receiver core. There's excuses to be made there, but I'm not sold on him being super duper impressive for Devy. I think Will Pauling is going to start in the slot. Bryson Green, CJ Williams are going to battle for the wide receiver 3. And then either the wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 between him and Pauling is going to be Kamari Dyke. He was the wide receiver 1 last year at 6'1", 198. He had 44 receptions, 653 yards, and 6 touchdowns. It's a pretty paltry line, but when you consider that Wisconsin barely threw the ball, Dyke really had a good productive season last year. 19.6% target share. He's a decent wide receiver, I think. Not super interested in Devy, but I think there is some potential in this offense for him to be a CFF relevant player.
Apparently, Chimray DK.
I got every single section of that wrong. Every single one.
I was saying it wrong in my head, too. I knew it was DK, but Chimray was not how I was going with that. So I like DK. I mean, the Beats have him as the wide receiver 1. I get the Luongo thing. We'll see how that plays out, but the reporters have said he's still going to be the wide receiver 1. He was the wide receiver 1 last year. He came back and has looked great.
And I like Pauling more at cost.
Pauling's free,
yeah.
Right? Like he don't get drafted. So DK did have a yards per route run over 3 last year, that wasn't a scheme. It wasn't like zone or man. It was all together. He was over 3, which is super impressive. That's like, if my Devy prospect hits that leading up to the draft, I'm stoked. I can like downplay it with narrative a little bit, right? Like you're running behind one of the 2 or 3 best running backs in the country. So it's like you're playing against a loaded box every single time. But nonetheless, like you are getting targeted the ball frequently when you're running routes and you are being really productive on them. So I'm like low key excited for him in terms of a guy you can get in like the 10th round or the 12th round of a supplemental. I think he could have some Devy ability, obviously a later breakout, but it's freaking Wisconsin. You know what I mean? It's like, they just did not throw the ball until hopefully this year, right?
Yeah.
So I think I ranked him pretty conservatively for how I feel about him, but
yeah, I moved him up on the Devy rankings.
Good.
Below Lions. I moved him above Petaway here. And then I actually moved him 3 spots down in CFF. Wigless, George, and Camper jumped him. I like all 3 of those guys quite a bit.
I like everyone in that range, really, right? Has some like significant upside. Yeah, I like honestly, like I am drafting DK for Devy purposes ahead of Hilaire, Isaiah Williams, Badger, Bernard, JoJo. I don't think is going to be a thing. Brendan Rice. I'm probably taking him ahead of all those guys personally. Is that your DeCorian Clark is vastly better for CFF, but actually Clark I think gets drafted though for sure.
Yeah, I think Larry does too, and I think Williams does.
Yeah. So
I don't know. Him and Hilaire are very similar players, I think. But Williams,
honestly, I think
fits the NFL.
Yeah, I think most of these guys are like definitely day 3 players. JoJo is the one that stands out to me as being like in the wrong spot. But
that's too high, too low.
Too high. I just don't know that he's an NFL player. I know the talent's there,
but
he hasn't been able to do it yet.
He's just like the potential in the sea of sure things in this Devy list,
Yeah, right.
He's the guy where if he breaks out, he's the wide receiver 4 in his class, right? But
I don't know if he's going to start.
I don't think he does. Yeah,
I don't think he does. He could. I mean, it's him or I forget. It's not even the kid that transferred from LSU. He's like not even on the depth chart. It's JoJo or someone else that's been there. But,
yeah, it's Jack Beck. So you're thinking of from LSU.
Yeah, which I like that too, but he's not a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's fair. I think we can move him right now. We'll put him below. We'll move him way down, I think. We'll put him all the way down. No.
I get why people like him. The high school film's awesome. The camp highlights have been great every year, or were great at Alabama, but you had to transfer out of Alabama, and now you're not starting at like a significantly lower tiered wide receiver room. Like we don't even know who the guy is there. If you can't be the guy in that room, you're probably not going to be a guy in the NFL, right? maybe he turns into a CFF thing. I could see that. Like, the kid's fast, you know.
The issue is if he turns into a CFF thing, he turns into a Devy thing because of his speed.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. He can't beat out John Paul Richardson right now. So,
Hey, maybe John Paul Richardson's a good player.
he could be. Yeah.
I don't think I like where you have Braylon Allen in CFF.
Where I have who?
Braylon Allen.
For CFF.
Yeah.
You would prefer to have Rasheen Ali. I mean, Allen is the returning RB3 in points per game, ahead of obviously Rasheen was hurt, so Rasheen could be better, but
I think we're way too low on quorum, actually. I don't know why I did that yesterday or last week.
We did that because Quorum's coming off an injury and it might be a timeshare.
Yeah.
I would still put him ahead of
Bangura. I mean, Bangura was the RB5 from last year. 20.45 points per
Braylon
game.
Allen outscored Bangura in the Born and Raised by about a half a point a game.
False.
So not much. We're talking about a razor thin
margin. That is false. That is false.
I have a hard time.
That is incorrect. That's factually incorrect information. I think you're on projections, not last year's.
Oh,
stats.
You're right. So wait, did Bangura outscore him last year? You're right.
Yeah, Bangura had 20.45 points per game, and Braylon Allen had 18 points per game.
All right.
So like Bangura outscored him, Webb outscored him, Evans outscored him, Gore, Ott, Wiley.
Oh yeah. I'm looking at
Nakia Watson outscored him.
All right. Yeah, put him fourth, fifth.
I think above Cooper. Yeah.
They're 16th, 18th.
I think.
Although I do think there's a shot.
I think we're too high on Cooper.
I guess. I don't know. Is Ball State significantly worse?
I mean, well, Cooper's 18 points, 19 points per game. Yeah, I guess it doesn't really matter. I guess they're all in the same tier here.
I think so.
I'm gonna move him down.
Yeah, we might be too low on Corum, just given the how good he was last year. But I really do think they play Donovan a little bit more. But yeah, you can bump him up if you want. All right.
Where did we end up putting Nakia Watson? Did we rank him?
No, I think you hate him.
Did he slip through the cracks? I don't really like him, but the production's insane.
He was super productive last year. You were telling me that it wasn't going to be Nakia Watson. You were trying to argue for the other one.
I like Jalen Jenkins.
Right. That's why we had to put Watson down here. But I think Watson should be at least a top 20 guy, right? I mean, yeah, there you go. That makes more sense. All right. You tinker. I will start my next team.
I love tinkering.
Tinkering is great.
I've decided that the players who get suspended are getting crossed out instead of deleted, by the way. So Hunter Deckers is crossed out. Arlen Bruce is crossed out.
In the air. Arlen Bruce crossed out.
Shame. How dare you bet? Yeah, did you hear the funniest story I saw from that? There was an Iowa State defensive lineman who bet on the Texas money line against Iowa State in 2021. And then Iowa State won 30-7.
That's pretty funny. Yeah.
All right.
It does seem like common sense to don't bet on your own games. That's how is that okay ever? Did you? Are these kids too young to remember Pete Rose?
Yeah. I am going to add one player too, and that's Nick Evers to the Devy list. I'm going to put him below Stone, above Reed.
I kind of have a thing where if a quarterback hasn't caught on a little bit by the middle of his sophomore year, then I feel like his Devy potential is a lot narrower path. Obviously, guys,
I think that's fair.
It, but it's
I like Longo's ability to develop quarterbacks, though, and I think obviously they bring in Evers, expecting him to take a year learning. So
That's true.
I don't know.
All right. So I'm going to talk about our favorite team to talk about tonight, I think for both of us, and that is Penn State. The Nittany Lions are going to be a lot of fun this year. We have a family relationship with them. My girl's dad was a Penn State guy. So
I forgot we still had to do them. We are going to be here for 2 hours.
yes. Well, I will be brief because I don't want to be here for 2 hours. But there's some fun.
I do. I cherish my time with you, Arik.
I do enjoy this, but nonetheless, I like sleeping too because I'm up at like 5 tomorrow. Drew Aller. How high are we on Drew Aller?
Very.
I mean, he was QB1 last year. I think for me, I liked Klubnik a lot too, but I had Aller ahead of him. He hasn't done anything to hurt that, you know. I mean, his stats weren't like good for him playing last year, but talked about like freshman stats are usually rough, right? They're not rough, then the kid's superstar automatically. But he still had four touchdowns, 0 interception ratio last year. Flashed in moments. You saw the talent. You saw the, opposite hash, 20 yards downfield strikes. He was a lot better in the spring game statistically than he was last year. 19 for 30, a couple of 100 yards, 4 15-plus yard passes. There's just a lot to like about this kid. He's got a little bit of mobility. He's got a cannon, and he has processing ability at a fairly high level already. So I think, the expectation is that he's going to be a first-round draft pick. Obviously, he has to prove it this year. If he doesn't, then we're having a different conversation, in week 10 or whatever. But I expect him to succeed for sure. The other super exciting Devy piece here is Nicholas Singleton. And, neither one of these are controversial, right? Like, I don't have anything that's like really opposite of consensus to say about these guys because Singleton is a monster. He's widely considered the Devy RB1. Last year it was kind of Henderson or Singleton, but just after the season they both put up last year, it's impossible for me to have Henderson ahead of Singleton. He just crushed as a true freshman with a backfield mate that was also productive. Just the efficiency, his tackle breaking ability was all on display. I mean, this kid is explosive. Over 1,000 yards, a true freshman, 12 touchdowns, 6.8 yards per attempt. He led this class in yards after contact per attempt with 4.58. I mean, I'm all in. All signs point to him being, the RB1 in this draft class, and like an instant, like the way we felt about JT coming in, the way we felt maybe not Bijan just because the pass catching, but like he's like right behind that, like in that range in terms of how we are going to feel about him for the NFL. So if you can throw the farm at Nicholas Singleton and take him down in a Devy league or in a C2C, burn those assets. It's money well spent. I don't think there's many doubters left, though. It's tough to do. The other noteworthy running back there is Katron Allen, who I think is perennially underrated because Singleton is so good. I think if Katron Allen was on a team, like 90% of the teams in the P5, he would be their starter. And if he was starting and had a backfield to himself, I think we'd probably be talking about him as more like the RB3 in that class behind just Singleton and Judkins, really. He's not as explosive as Singleton. He wasn't as efficient between the tackles, but as a true freshman, he got 20 passes, 88 yards, went for a touchdown. He was more efficient as a receiving weapon than Singleton is. I mean, you step out, zoom out, and look at Katron Allen's profile, and it is a good profile. So not much negative to say about him. He's just not as explosive of an athlete as Singleton. Trayshawn Potts transferred there. He's probably the RB3 unless he gets passed up. he's a competent running back. Don't expect him to be a thing for CFF unless they really get decimated with injuries. Interestingly, one of the most hyped newcomers to the team is running backs. True freshman Cameron Wallace was getting significant beat hype. He was dropped as one of 3 newcomers to make an impact this year on the field. Impact might be relative since he's running behind 2 high-end Devy running backs, but it has to be said, maybe Katron Allen transfers and this kid is a thing all of a sudden. I don't expect that, but could happen. Tough to draft a guy that you're not going to be able to start until 2025, right? So, but who knows? Definitely got a watch list for sure. The wide receiver room is interesting, but there's just not a lot sorted there. There's a lot of guys, but some of them are just guys, right? I think the headliner is probably Dante Cephas, transfer from Penn State, where he went for 3.2 yards per route run last year on a substantial volume. I mean, that is, as I was just saying a little bit ago with DK, that's a good number. And yeah, it's G5, but still, like, you're doing something right. You're outperforming the field there for sure. And he's got length, he's got speed. He could be a Devy guy. He is probably in his 4th season, so the prognosis for a guy like that is a little bit harsher, right? It's tough to make him a day 2 wide receiver unless he goes for like 1,800 yards this year. He'd really have to do like a Xavier Hutchinson, right, to get into round 3. That would be the kind of performance he would need, but that could happen, depending on how him and Alar link up. The vet in the room's Keandre Lambert-Smith. He was a high 4-star himself. Was actually recruited more highly than Parker Washington. His companion there who went to the NFL ahead of him. He's a really good athlete. He went for 389 yards, 4 touchdowns last year. He was 3 for 124 in the bowl game. Could be the guy there. At least he will be a starter for sure. When they talk about starters, they talk about Lambert-Smith, they talk about Harrison Wallace, and then who else is out there? But I think clearly Cephas is at worst the 2nd most talented guy in that room right now. Harrison Wallace, I just mentioned, you don't hear anyone talking about him, but he went out there as a true freshman last year, went for almost 300 yards, played ahead of Caden Saunders, who was a highly recruited 4-star, like a high 4-star, like a top 15 type wide receiver. And in spring, regarding his performance in the spring, the coaches said he was one of the 2 most improved players. So this is a guy that could be a thing. He could be a Devy thing. He is not a year 1-0, right? And this is a guy with prototypical alpha size that plays X wide receiver, plays on the outside. He's a boundary guy. So definitely got a watch list. CFF, does he do anything? I don't know. He could take a stride. He could be the guy there. You know what I'm saying? There's just not much settled here. So I'm definitely going to keep an eye on a room like this because I think value could emerge. And there's a couple people here that could be Devy assets. Caden Saunders is the most highly recruited guy in the room, as I mentioned. Complete 0 last year. Not even didn't hit our thresholds. Was literally caught 1 pass. And yet in spring game, he was one of Alar's main targets. So again, another guy that could be a guy there. Unlikely he is a top 3. Likely he gets playing time. So this could just be a hot mess, But a guy like Saunders could have an explosive sophomore season and go on to be a Devy asset. So you don't want to drop him if you got him, but I'm not expending resources chasing him until he does something either. Tight end is generally a useful position at Penn State, and these guys all go on to the NFL. We saw Brenton Strange go on to the NFL this year and get drafted in the 2nd round to the surprise of many. He likely wasn't the best tight end on the roster last year. The Devy people all think Theo Johnson is better. He's certainly the better athlete, but Strange did outperform him last year. I think there was some injuries that played into that, but nonetheless, a breakout is expected for Theo Johnson. And he was fine last year, a couple of 100 yards. I think he's at least startable this year, and I think if he plays well, he gets drafted. There's Tyler Warren as well, who's kind of been in the committee with Strange and Johnson for the past couple of years. Warren could be the better asset, but I'm still going to bet on the better athlete right now. And I do want Theo Johnson if he's free. I just don't want to pay much for him. I think the most interesting name in the tight end room right now is Rapalea, true freshman Andrew Rapalea. He's that all-purpose tight end that Penn State loves to roll out there. He's a guy that'll get on the field this year, but again, buried on the depth chart ahead of two decent players. He was tight end 11 for 247. I watched a little bit of his film, and I don't think he is an elite athlete. It's not like watching Brock Bowers' high school film or Oscar Delp's where they move like a wide receiver, even though they're 230 pounds. He definitely looks like a bigger guy out there and, more like a 4.7 type athlete right now. But clean through his breaks, nice hands, good ability to pluck the ball out of the air. So I think he's maybe more in that Cole Kmet type mold, but a definite Devy asset. And he goes super late in supplementals too. So, if you need tight end help in the NFL side of your C2C, you could do a lot worse than making a move and acquiring some Rapalea for yourself. That's what I got. So I think it's a big old mess. I think there's going to be some value here. There could be some CFF value that emerges. The only one that gets drafted from this room in CFF drafts is really Cephas. Sometimes you'll see Lambert Smith go late. I don't mind that in a best ball because the kid can break off a couple of big plays and earn his keep. But I could not pick the guy that you want to bet on here if it's not Cephas.
I agree. I think one of the wide receivers finishes higher than I have the highest one ranked. I just don't know who.
Don't know who, unless Alar really spreads the ball out. But
yeah. Or unless Theo Johnson takes 50 receptions somehow.
Yeah, could happen. And then he's the tight end 3 or 4 or something in CFF, right? If that happens. So, all right.
Tell me where I'm wrong here.
Oh, yeah. I'm not even paying attention. I mean, you're high on Alar, but I think that's reasonable. I think I would take Nelson over him right now. But I think that's a tier.
Yeah, it's a how long do you want to wait play, I think.
Yeah, well, you get Dante Moore ahead of him.
Yeah, I think Dante Moore's special though.
Malachi Nelson is too. They're both really good.
Yeah.
Whatever. That's where you're wrong. Katron Allen, I like where you have him ranked. I think that's probably a little bit higher than consensus.
I couldn't pull up my rankings. That's why I got confused. But I actually have Drew Alar as QB3, so he would, in fact, be ahead of Dante Moore. I forgot Drake May existed.
Yeah.
That was the issue.
Silly, man. So, I like where Katron is. I don't like where Gianti is. Honestly, Katron should be ahead of Gianti for sure. One of them's playing P5 and has already done damage as a true freshman. Gianti got on the field. He looked good, but it's a lot harder path to him to get drafted in the second round than it is for Katron Allen right now.
Where did Doug Martin get drafted?
Doug Martin was good for 1 year. He would suck.
Doug Martin was a first-round pick, running back out of Boise State.
10 years ago. 12 years ago. That's not the same NFL, dude.
I like Jonty.
Half the NFL players that are in the league right now were in diapers,
Hey, half of them were at Boise State, actually.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, mostly, I think this is all fine. Fine. I think
I
if
think
Cephas
I
is
could
the
have
guy,
Allen too low in CFF.
what'd you say?
Could. I said I think I could have Allen too low in CFF. If that running back room's like incredibly good.
Dude, he went for
It's just
1,000 on
tough.
purpose last year.
Yeah.
Like last year as a true freshman. But the thing is, like, do you project more for him? They already both got all of the work, the two of them. You know, it's hard to project a lot more than already being awesome. I think you give Singleton a couple hundred more yards than he didn't get last year. You give Allen a little bit more, but
yeah,
so,
it's
yeah,
tough.
I'm generally pretty good with this.
Cool. We will move on then. That's what we like to hear. Prefer when Arik does. Actually, that's a lie. I prefer when he argues with me. I like that. But I will move on to Nebraska. The wallows of the Big Ten of recent years. They finally move on, trying to figure something out at the head coaching position. They hire Matt Rule, who was fired this offseason from the Carolina Panthers. But this is a guy who's had a good college career in the past. I mean, he took Temple and did some good things over at Temple, moved on to Baylor, did really well at Baylor. So comes back to the college coaching ranks. I think he can do better than he did in Carolina. I mean, that's a low bar, but I definitely think he's more of a college coach than an NFL coach. He brings in Marcus Satterfield as his OC, though. I think that's a horrible decision. Marcus Satterfield was the OC at South Carolina for the last 2 seasons. His offenses were usually pretty tough to watch. Had some games here and there where they would go off. Most of the time, not super stunning. But yeah, Satterfield's a guy who coached under Rule, both at Baylor and with the Panthers, not as the OC at either of those stops, but moves up to OC now. I also read an interview where he said he is, quote unquote, on a crusade to restore the huddle, which I hate. The huddle is not important. See, college football offenses have proved that you don't actually have to go in the huddle.
Yeah, I don't even really know like where he's going with that. You want to play
He
slow?
called it the heart and soul of the offense.
Oh, ooh.
So yeah, that's fun. So yeah, I think this is an offense that could possibly be worse than it was last year for CFF. I have high hopes for Matt Rule. I don't expect it to happen this season, especially when we look at the personnel he's going to trot out there. And most of my concern stems from the quarterback position, where he brings in transfer quarterback Jeff Sims from Georgia Tech. Was originally going to be a competition between him and Casey Thompson, but Casey Thompson left for FAU, cleared the way for Jeff Sims to start, and Jeff Sims has started 3 seasons for Georgia Tech, which means almost nothing because Georgia Tech's horrible, but in those 3 seasons, he has PFF passing grades of 48.3, 57.4, and 52. He has a career 57.3% completion percentage. I think Jeff Sims is going to be bad for this offense in general. Definitely not a good quarterback for wide receivers to thrive with. I think there's a case to be made that Jeff Sims is a decent CFF option by himself because he can run the football. His freshman year, he had 642 rushing yards, followed that up with 449 and 405 in the last 2 seasons. So that's worth something. I just don't see him as a good passer of the football. I think he brings down the rest of the offense. But bad quarterback play can only bring down running back so much. So I do think this team has a strong running attack this year with Jeff Sims and these running backs. Matt Rule has said plenty of times that he feels good about his offensive line going into this season. And they bring back 3 guys, really, but 2 guys who I think are good. Anthony Grant and Gabe Irvin return at running back, Grant's in his like 6th year of college now. He enrolled at Florida State back in 2018 as a freshman, left Florida State and played community college ball before coming back to the FBS and Nebraska last season, where he took 216 carries for 909 yards and 6 touchdowns, 18 receptions for 104 yards. I think he's a good college running back. I was kind of hopeful for some Devy potential last year, but I don't really see it anymore. He wasn't very efficient. Of course, the offensive line wasn't great. Nobody was really efficient last year. He's 5'11", 200 pounds, so he has decent size. I think he, I want to say he's the RB1, but it doesn't really feel like it when the staff talks about Gabe Ervin. Gabe Ervin is a guy who came in as a 3-star in 2021, and he basically won the job in preseason. I mean, he came out and took the most snaps in the first 4 games at the running back position. He had 37 carries, 124 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Not very impressive in those 4 games, but what was impressive was really the snap count and the fact that he had more carries than a couple of guys who were older than him as a true freshman. And then his true freshman season was cut short by an ACL tear after 4 games, so not much there. And then last year, just 20 carries for 94 yards in 7 games. He had a nagging turf toe injury that kind of took him out and off the field. There were a lot of games where he'd come in and play like 5 snaps and then not play again. So the production's not there for Gabe Ervin, but he's a guy that I know Alfred Fernandez was high on as a freshman. I mean, I liked him after Alfred recommended him to me. So I think Ervin's a very athletic running back, especially for a guy who's 6 foot 225. I mean, that's NFL size, and he is super fast for being 225. And the coaching staff just raves about him every time they get the chance to. I mean, Matt Rule called him a star of the offseason. I believe Matt Rule implemented this like tradition where there's like 4 guys who get like instead of like the Buckeyes like taking off the black stripe or whatever, they get a number in the single digits. So Gabe Ervin was one of 4 guys to get a number in the single digits, one of 2 guys on offense, I believe. So I wouldn't be surprised if Ervin takes this backfield from Anthony Grant, but I would be surprised if it was fully Ervin. So I think for CFF, the 2 of them splitting work won't be super exciting, but maybe Ervin can really do something for CFF next year in his senior season. And then they also have Ramir Johnson on the roster. He's a Jag, but last season he had 111 carries, 492 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So he'll probably get some work too. I mean, I think it's a disgusting backfield for CFF. So not great there. And then at wide receiver, they bring 2 guys returning from last year who caught at least 1 pass last season. One of those is Marcus Washington. I think he's worth talking about. He's in his 5th season in college football. He played his first 3 at Texas and then transferred to Nebraska last year. And then last year he had 31 receptions, 471 yards, and a touchdown. He seems to be the starting wide receiver 1 outside. He's 6'2", 190. There's nothing there for Devy. He'll score some points for CFF. I mean, there's a case to be made that you can watch list him and maybe he'll do something. And then one guy who has had some hype around him for a while and never really taken off at all is Xavier Betts. He joined Nebraska in the class of 2020 as, the big deal, home state Nebraska talent kid, was the wide receiver 20 in the class at 6'2", 200. Field stretcher type. He had 20 receptions, 286 yards, and no touchdowns in 2021, but missed all of the 2022 season due to injury. So maybe Xavier Betts pops back off. My pick to actually lead the wide receiver room in this offense is Billy Kemp IV, who is transferring in from Virginia. He is also one of those 4 guys to earn a single digit. He is 5'9", 170. So not a Devy guy, but he is fast, he is quick, he's elusive, and he has prior production. Back in 2020 for Virginia, he had 67 receptions, 644 yards, and a touchdown. Parlayed that into 2021, where he had 74 receptions, 725 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And then last season dealt with some injuries, only played in 7 games. I see him as possibly an 800-yard receiver. Like if Jeff Sims can throw for 2,400, 500, I could see Billy Kemp as an 800-yard receiver. But I think that might be a tough task. And then one last guy I think is interesting in this wide receiver room is Malachi Coleman. He is a true freshman and the 11th ranked athlete in the class by 24/7. And I tell you what, he is an athlete. He is 6'4", 190 pounds, clocked at 21.5 miles per hour. Anything above 20 miles per hour is good enough. Anything up near 22 is elite. And to be 6'4" at 21.5 is very, very impressive. Other guys like that are like Martavis Bryant, Demarius Thomas, and Julio Jones. I mean, not many people are that tall and that fast. So I think Malachi Coleman is a name who has a very clear path to not being a year 1-0 in terms of Devy, and definitely somebody who could take off in this Nebraska offense. And then they just bring in a bunch of dudes. Like they need wide receivers, so they bring them in. One of which they brought in, here's my anecdote for Nebraska football. They bring in Baylor transfer Josh Fleeks, who is a 6th-year senior and a 4-star rated transfer. He shows up to Nebraska, and Matt Rule sends him home for being overweight. So he, instead of using, the almost $1 billion facility Nebraska has in the weight room, he wants him to go home to work on his weight. Wild.
Matt Rule, people.
Matt Rule. That's the shit that works in college sometimes, but does not fly in the NFL. So, yeah.
You're
not really
an
NFL
You're not dealing
guy.
with kids in the NFL. You're dealing with grown men that make millions of dollars. Right?
Yeah. And then they bring in 5. They bring in 5 3-star wide receivers, freshmen. Jaden Doss, Jeremiah Charles, Bryce Turner, Quentin Ives, and Demetrius Bell. They are all the exact same player. They are all 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", decently athletic. Any of these guys could pop off, and it wouldn't be a surprise. I think Demetrius Bell would be my pick, just because he is the only one who I would consider a refined route runner in any way. Most of these other guys are just tall and fast. So I think
it's 165 pounds right now. I also like him, but relatively speaking, for a 14th round supplemental pick.
I wouldn't even pick him, but I'll think about him when week 2 comes around. I'll look and see how many snaps he's played. But
right, yeah, if he's on the field, definitely he's an athlete too. So,
and then tight end. I think tight end is the most excited I am about anyone on this team. And when you hear that, if you know Nebraska, you probably think it's Arik Gilbert, the transfer in from Georgia, who's uber athletic. Was highly touted as a recruit, carries all this, notoriety on his shoulders despite doing very little. But it's not Arik Gilbert that I'm interested in. It's Thomas Fedone. Thomas Fedone back in 2021 was the tight end 2 in the class, I believe, possibly behind Arik Gilbert, actually. But Fedone has had knee injuries in both of the last 2 seasons, prevent him from really seeing the field. But Matt Rule has been just incredibly full of praise for Thomas Fedone and his leadership. He seems to be, the guy in the locker room. Definitely in terms of talent and on the field, he seems to be the guy at tight end above Arik Gilbert. Although with this horrible wide receiver room, I think there's definitely room for both of them to be productive in this offense. But I do like Fedone quite a bit for Devy. if he can stay healthy and not have another knee injury.
Big if, dude. He's on that Baylor Cup path right now.
Yeah, that's fair.
Sad, but it's true. All right.
Why are we ranking Jeff Sims? Why are we doing this to ourselves?
For CFF?
For Devy.
He's going to run for 600 yards?
For Devy.
Oh. My answer to every question like this is Kenny Pickett.
No, he's not Kenny Pickett. I refuse.
Kenny Pickett was sucked for 4 years and then had one good year and got drafted.
He didn't suck that much.
He was like Cade McNamara for 4 years and then had one good year.
No, there was more to like about Kenny Pickett. I'm gonna move Gabe Ervin up a little bit, not a ton.
His film wasn't good his freshman year. I know he got the ball, but like I watched his film and he really wasn't.
Everybody's film was bad his freshman year, though. That team sucked.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. Sure.
Like that was before Casey Thompson. That team was.
He's big and he's fast.
Adrian Martinez. Hey, the NFL cares about guys who are big and fast.
I know they do.
I think Coleman also and Devy is too low.
I mean, I thought about it, and I was like, Jaquazi Petaway is kind of the same guy, but I mean, Noah Rogers, you could put him with Noah Rogers, and I'm cool with that. Want me to do that? I'll do that.
Let's split the difference. Let's put him maybe have right below. Oh, I did the wrong thing. Put him right here.
Putting him below Rogers? I put him above
right
Rogers.
Below Cephas. I don't like Rogers either, but I see the talent.
Yeah, he's good. He's just going to have to transfer.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know though. I mean, we say that, and then like Malik Neighbors is the lowest ranked guy in his room, and he's the best player. It happens every year. But the thing is that like Innis and Tate are very good.
Yeah. Oh wait, we get to cross out Jyrell Brock too. I almost forgot about him. He's also suspended for gambling.
For gambling. Oh, Jyrell Brock is?
Yeah.
Oh.
Which also means his college career is finished.
Yeah, since he's 23 years old already.
Well, literally, I mean, anyone who gets caught gambling in the NCAA is going to come down bad on these guys.
That's great for Cartavius Norton. We should probably put Norton where Brock was.
Yes, but we are keeping Brock.
It's X'd out for shame.
For shame.
Both of us and all 5 people that will download this will know the shame of Jyrell Brock. All right. I got a team here. I got a team for you.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's a team and it plays football.
Is it Northwestern?
It is better than Northwestern.
Is it actually? Did you see what Northwestern did with the shirts that were like all in for the Wildcats, and then they had fucking what's his name? The guy they just fired, they had his old number on there.
Oh, no, I didn't see that.
Like, really? You're going to support the guy who just got fired for fucking hazing?
For letting the students haze? Yeah, they're
that is a great way for, everyone to get fired.
Burn it to the ground, what I say.
Hope.
So this is a team I got a soft spot for. Michigan State. I always want them to be fun, but and in reality, we get these sneaky Devy pieces out of here all the time.
You were correct. They are a team who plays football.
They are a team that plays football, right? And the last few years, at least, we've had these missiles come out, right? Like Kenneth Walker, right? Was like okay. He was at 2 schools first. He was at like Wake. He was somewhere else. And there's Michigan State and just went nuclear. Last year, Jaden Reed, right? Jaden Reed, day 2 wide receiver. NFL draft, right? Like top 50 draft capital. and he was good, but he never was. He was never a guy that we were drooling over in college. He was a guy that you wanted to roster. He got some hype. The Devy Watch guys liked him. They also liked AJ Henning. You know what I mean? So they develop some good pieces here, or at least they land some talent that goes on. And my favorite guy there last year was Keon Coleman, who has departed to the warmer waters of Florida, which makes me sad because he was going to go for like 1,200 yards this year. They were just going to throw him the ball over and over and over again. And he's probably not going to get that at FSU. But that leaves just like...
Okay, before you start talking, there are a couple guys I really like at Michigan State, and if you say anything bad about them, I will not be happy. But I'm not going to tell you who they are until you mention them.
I'm unlikely to badmouth them. I like some of the players here. So I just want to say that just the problem is they just have this like absolute gap of the offense. Peyton Thorne transferred, Auburn. Keon Coleman would have been their wide receiver 1 this year, transferred, FSU. Jaden Reed, top receiver last year, gone, NFL. They got cleaned out in the portal and by the draft. So, like, who is going to do what here? The Devy hope was for Caton Hauser to be the thing, some kind of thing for them, athletic 4-star from last year, and that looks like it ain't going to happen. Noah Kim.
That was one of the guys.
Yeah.
I was really hoping you would say it would happen.
It ain't going to happen. Apparently Noah Kim has played well, though, so it's less that Caton Hauser is a stinky bag of doo-doo and more that Noah Kim seems to be a competent college quarterback. Although I will say, like, for the most part, it was like there was never really like 3-way quarterback competition. It was like Peyton Thorne versus Noah Kim. They kind of just like glossed over Hauser in the beat reports. So that was, I also have some Hauser. I was sad. So it could still happen, but it, looks less likely when a guy can't win the starting job over a 3-star. So is Kim good? I don't know. He made some really nice throws in the spring game, but one game does not a season make. The guy to get excited about in the QB room, if you want to get excited about a Michigan State quarterback, is probably Sam Levitt.
I do.
Yeah, he's a 247 QB 18. The Campus to Canton guys are substantially higher on him than that. I think they have him at like 7.
I'm substantially higher than that.
Yeah.
I also have him
Where do you
7
have
or
him?
8.
Yeah. I look. He's got some tools. He can move through his progressions. He can run the ball. His first year as a starter in high school, he was throwing to, like an All-American wide receiver. I can't remember who, but they just referenced it in his write-ups. And then, his later years as a starter, he was playing with substantially lower tier talent and elevating everyone around him. I love it when quarterbacks can do that. I mean, for me, that is, it's a trait I love when you can bring the team up around you. I think that's a trait, and I think it's a potent trait, and it translates to the next level. The problem is, who the hell is this guy throwing the ball to? The star of spring ball was Tyrell Henry. He was referenced as a Keon Coleman replacement by one beat. It's a true sophomore, 6'0", 160 as a recruit. Obviously, he's in his second year now. It was referenced that you should buy stock in him. So Tyrell Henry, people, could be a thing. Antonio Gates Jr. obviously has some pedigree. He got a tutty in spring ball. He's a little bigger, 6'1", 185. He could be a thing. Monteroy Foster is probably a starting wide receiver. He's like a fifth-year guy. Gets that veteran bump. Malik Carr is there. Might still be a starter.
Is he listed at tight end or wide receiver?
They referred to him as tight end, as a wide receiver in the write-ups, but I think he's dual in Fantrax still. I do think he's kind of just a big slot though. I guess the guy you want for CFF is probably Trey Mosley. He was supposed to be the wide receiver 2 behind Coleman. He's a slot guy. 6'2", 180. He's not a little guy. He's a graduate transfer and has had some productive seasons. So he's probably the guy you want there for CFF. I mean, do you want him? I don't know. I mean, Coleman was decent last year. Reed was decent. They weren't 1,200-yard wide receivers, but they both went for 800. If it is just one guy, it could be better. Quarterback play could be better. I never really thought Thorne was anything special. I thought he was a competent mid-level, like low to mid-level college quarterback. See how he does at Auburn. I'm sure we'll talk about him soon.
What was that name?
Trey Mosley. Mosley.
What year is he?
He's a graduate. Graduate transfer. Yeah. Fifth or sixth year. I think he's a fifth. He came up from G5. I didn't write down what school he came from. And then there's at least one new name to get a little bit excited about. I've been drafting Jalen Smith. 247 has him as a 3-star, but another guy that the Campus to Canton guys are higher on. And I think largely when we have that conversation is usually about athleticism and the athleticism giving you some Devy upside, right? That players that don't have that talent level don't have, right? Doesn't mean you're going to hit, but means you have the potential to hit. And you were the guy that, wasn't the most prolific wide receiver in high school because he played quarterback and he played running back. He was a two-way player. So, best guy on the field, was a track guy. It could happen, right? So he's probably your best bet for Devy upside there. I did take a share or two of Gates super late because he was free. Why not? If he turns into a thing, I'd like to have him rostered. That's about what I got for the wide receiver room. Then a running back, Jalen Berger, Wisconsin transfer, was fine. Went for 683 yards, 6 touchdowns, caught 19 passes. That was always one of the parts of his profile that we liked, was that he was a pass catcher in high school. He did that last year for Wisconsin. He did it competently. Last year was kind of a timeshare between him and Jarek Broussard. Broussard was not good, though. Beats, in so many words, politely say he was not good last year, but the data certainly plays that out. They did get a couple of transfers in, but the only one I'm really interested in is Nathan Carter. He's a little bit of a little guy, 5'10", $190. Transferred in from UConn. He had a couple of games last year, admittedly against lower tier competition, that he just went off. He had 310 yards across 2 games. Got graded out as a decent enough running back by PFF. It wasn't like a top 10 guy, but certainly was, a lot of green on his charts for rushing grades. And then, some beats mentioned him as a guy that could happen. So maybe you see this as a timeshare, Berger, Carter. I think if you're hoping for Kenneth Walker, you're going to be disappointed. There's just no one at that talent level. But they do run the ball. They've had a history of having good line play and, and being able to run it up the tackles. So, God, can Carter catch the edge? Yeah, he's fast. So that could be a thing. That's what I got. You got anything on Michigan State?
I love Nathan Carter. That is
he's a
the
fun little
person
player.
you could not bring down for me. I love Nathan Carter. He was just so freaking good at UConn last year. He was just killing teams, completely by himself.
Yeah. So just to throw a little, I like him too, a little cold water. And it was UConn. They're a trash bag team, right? It was him and Aaron Turner last year. His good games were against FCS teams, like his crazy games. He played a couple other teams. I'm trying to pull up the game logs. Oh, for some reason they don't have his 2022 game logs on Sports Reference. I don't understand why. It's UConn. It's not a Fantrax bowl, though. I looked them up on PFF, is I think where I found them. But and the thing is, he wasn't terrible in the other games, even though he was playing on a terrible team. But yeah, Syracuse, 16 for 71, 2 catches. I mean, that's fine. Syracuse is a better program. Michigan, 6 for 21. It's Michigan, so can't hold that against him.
That's impressive for a UConn running back against Michigan. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, and you know what? The first game was actually against Utah State, so
yeah,
an okay team. You know, certainly not an FBS team or FCS team. They're a G5, right?
Yeah, I think Carter's a good back. I think he can take over this offense. I don't think Berger is anything to me, really. I don't think he's particularly good.
He's just not that athletic, I think. I think he's like a competent college running back. He's not going to be an NFL player. He catches passes better than most college running backs, but that's the highest praise I can give him.
Yeah.
Carter is interestingly still unrostered in most of my leagues. You have him in one, I have him in one, and he is unrostered in like 10 leagues. So
interesting. I have a lot of hope for Carter.
I'm surprised you didn't put Leave It Higher. Levitt.
Yeah, I have him right behind Keinholz in this class. I think I see the issue. I think I see what I want to do. That's what I want.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Jaden Delora is really like as much, Devy upside. The rest of that I can get behind. Now, I guess the other ranking that's interesting to me is Antonio Gates.
Yeah.
He's a year 1-0, right?
I thought he had like one good game.
I think he had like one catch.
There are no statistics. That's fair.
No statistics recorded. Yeah, he couldn't get on the field. But, like, they had a decent wide receiver core last year, right? I mean,
Jaden Reed, Keon Coleman.
And Bernard, right? So
yeah.
You couldn't get on the field above Bernard. It's not like they're in blowouts. They're confident enough and usually not get crushed. And except by
the issue is he gets on the field and he does a little bit and he gets so much hype.
Yeah.
Like he's already getting hyped for like his spring game, like one catch or whatever.
Although I saw some people say, yeah, Antonio Gates caught a touchdown pass, but what it was an awesome throw by Kim. More than one person pointed that out, which doesn't mean it was bad on him, but I mean, yeah, the pedigree is always going to produce hype, whether it's warranted or not. It's just going to happen.
Yeah, that's kind of why I put him so high. I will move him down.
But yeah, I was going to say, I think just given the option, Jalen Smith right now is starting the clean slate. Like he's and ranked more highly. Like I can't give you a logical reason other than his name to put Gates ahead. And that's usually bad process.
I think the NFL falls trapped to bad process.
Yeah, with day 3 picks, But yeah. But the NFL makes terrible decisions routinely all the time. All right. Bring us home, Kyle.
You want to argue with, or are we bringing it home?
No. I'm running out of argument juice.
Maryland. My last team of the day. Dan Enos is out as OC. I think that should be good for anyone. They bring in Mike Locksley was the co-OC last year. They bring in Kevin Sumlin to be the new co-OC with Mike Locksley. They both have pretty decent offensive experience. I mean, Sullivan, of course, was a very bad head coach at Texas A&M, but I mean, as an OC, he obviously did enough to earn that job. So I think they're good offensive minds. I think it's a step up to replace Dan Enos. Talia Tagovailoa is back at quarterback. He's been pretty good for his collegiate career. Not quite a world beater, but, more than good enough. I mean, 68.6% completion percentage last year, 2,780 yards, 17 touchdowns, and six interceptions in 11 games last year. In 2021, he had 3,500 passing yards and 24 touchdowns, and he's been decently productive on the ground as well, adding 240 plus rushing yards in both those years. So he's a pretty solid quarterback. I'm not sold on Devy anymore. I mean, it seems like he's had the opportunity to go and hasn't gone, and doesn't really seem to get any hype in terms of the NFL. So I don't think he's a guy where we're looking at in that lens anymore. And then at running back, they return last year's leading rusher, Roman Hemby, who was a true freshman last season and had 923 yards and 10 touchdowns on 163 attempts. Very, very productive for a true freshman. Added 32 receptions for 293 yards. I mean, you love to see a guy who's doing it on the ground and through the air as a true freshman for a Power 5 team. So I think Roman Hemby is a great CFF option. Probably something there for Devy. I think he's a little small. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Slender.
Like,
I think he's like 6'1", 200 or 6'1", 202, if I recall correctly.
6'2", no weight on the Maryland website.
Yeah, he's like 205-ish.
6'2", 200 on Wikipedia. So, yeah. A tall back, a little slender. He probably has room to put a weight on that frame. So I think Hemby's very interesting, especially for a guy who's 6'2" at running back to catch 32 passes. I mean, that's definitely something. And then Hemby was like a 3-star recruit last year as a true freshman, and they brought in a guy who was a 4-star, Ramon Brown, and everybody kind of thought Brown would be ahead. Hemby was definitely an afterthought before the season, but it ended up being the Hemby show. But Brown was one of the backups. I think he'll probably step into a primary backup role this season. He had 34 carries of 127 yards last season, added 8 receptions for 40 yards. And then the wide receiver room is pretty barren, or at least it was when the offseason began. Dante Demas Jr., Raheem Jarrett, Jacob Copeland, all 3 go pro last season. So all that really left in the chamber was Ty Felton, who is a 6'1", 185 junior going into the season. He's a fast wide receiver and a pretty darn good route runner. He had 23 receptions, 309 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns last season. And then they bring in a transfer from Florida International, Tyrese Chambers, who is a deep threat at also at 6'1", 185. Had a really, really outstanding freshman year at Florida International. Broke out with 45 receptions for 1,074 yards and 9 touchdowns. If you're doing the math in your head, that's like 20 yards a reception, which is pretty insane. Fell back down to earth in his sophomore season with 51 receptions, 544 yards, and 4 touchdowns. FIU is a bad offense just in general. So Chambers is kind of looking at stepping into a better offense, a better situation with a much better quarterback, while also playing against better corners. So I think it'll be interesting to see, if he can take a step from where he was at FIU in this Maryland offense, or if he takes a step back. I want to be surprised by either one, but I tend to think that Tyrese Chambers is a good player. He's a guy who, when he entered the portal, I was hoping he'd come to Tennessee. So I think that means that I think he's good. So, I think the guy other than Hemby and Talia that I'm most excited about for CFF this year is Corey Dykes, the tight end. He's a redshirt junior who's 6'2", 220, so he's basically only a CFF tight end. He's not going to make waves in the NFL at that size unless he really switches to wide receiver. But last season, he split work with CJ Dipper, who transferred to Alabama this offseason. The two of them combined for 65 receptions last year, and Dykes himself had 35 of those 65 for 439 yards and 3 touchdowns. Obviously, in a perfect world, we want to just say that Dykes takes all that production for himself as the sole tight end. Probably not quite how it's going to work out, but with all the wide receivers leaving too, I do see a path for Dykes to be a 60 reception tight end, which would put him in the tight end 1 conversation, or the top 12 tight end conversation. And that's all I have on Maryland. They don't recruit very well at the moment.
MB though, I like MB.
Yeah, just no guys who pop off the page as high schoolers. Definitely.
Yeah,
I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if one of them pops off as a freshman, but don't know which one.
Gotta rank DKs. I would say his name Dykes. Corey Dykes. He's a guy who can go to the NFL, I bet.
Yeah, he's not going to play in line at 6'2", 220 though.
Oh, you're right. He's a little guy.
Yeah, he could play big slot,
but there's so many guys that fit that profile.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I like Kemby a lot. I mean, he was the returning RB. I think it's 30 or something because he didn't score touchdowns at all. 50th overall, 20 per page. He's 21. So I don't know. I can't put him ahead of Singleton, but I don't want to. I would rather start him than start Donovan Edwards. So I thought that was kind of a pretty logical spot to land him. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I like where you put him. I think Tyrese is the wild card here. I think he's the best player that Talia's played with, the best wide receiver. I didn't think Jarrett was that good ever.
Yeah, I mean, all these other guys had so much pedigree, though. It's tough to say.
So much pedigree, but they just didn't do it. Tyrese did it as a 19-year-old kid, went for 1,200 yards.
Against who?
Yeah, and I do remember I rostered him a lot, and it was several 180-yard games. It wasn't 100 yards a game every week, but I don't know. See what happens, right? I mean, they've spread the ball out is what they've done. I don't know if that's Talia or if that's the previous offensive coordinator's decision-making, but they have not had a concentrated passing tree to date, so
yeah,
see what happens. No one else there excites me for them to throw the ball to, particularly.
Yeah. I moved him down a little bit because of that, and also, just taking that step from G5 to P5 can be a big deal for a lot of guys.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if you should be ahead of Cephas. You should probably be behind Cephas.
I think that's fair.
Cephas has done more. I'm doing it right now. Okay. Anything else on Maryland? I got nothing for you here. They're kind of a fun team. Oh, you missed a critical piece here.
Yeah.
And you should feel bad about yourself.
Okay.
Antwain the Little Train, man. Antwain Littleton. How could you leave him out?
Who?
He's 245 pounds at running back. Spring game hero. He started ahead of Hemby at the beginning of the season, but then Hemby was just so good he took the job. But Littleton was never bad either. Just Hemby is, a high level talent for CFF, I think, or for college football. You don't got to rank him. It would be want to do a podcast about Maryland without bringing him up.
Littleton, 74 attempts, 369 yards, and 6 touchdowns last year. Fair enough.
Yeah,
I see it.
And he's fun. He's like 245 pounds at like, not even like, I don't know. He's like a linebacker or even like a deep, like an edge guy. It's just built. All right. Does that put the Big Ten to rest for us?
Yeah, finally.
I'm excited to not talk about the Big Ten.
Me too.
For a couple of weeks here until we have college football. We're making progress.
So what's next?
My friend.
We got 2 left. How do you want to do it? Should we just jump to the SEC so we get it done before the season starts, or do we talk about the ACC?
I think we should probably just start with the SEC. I mean, I want to do ACC first, but if we can't schedule 4 nights in the next 2 weeks, we won't get everything done.
What if we were really fast on the ACC and we did it all in one show?
God, some pieces, man. You
get to talk about the 4 guys a team max, nothing else.
We could spend 40 minutes on Clemson and FSU. The rest of the conference, I don't know, we could do without, but you say that, we're just going to talk about guys at Wake Forest. There's.
We can always find something to talk about. We've proved that time and time again in this series. We've talked about the MAC, the Mountain West. I mean, I'm sure we spent 30 minutes on Baylor or something. So
made an hour show out of the Mountain West somehow. So up to you, man. We can try to do the ACC blitz if you want.
All right.
Or we can do the SEC, but
maybe we can find a night where you can start a little earlier just in case it does last.
Yeah, it's tough. My girlfriend gets home at 7. She gets home at 8:30 on Mondays, and Tuesdays I'm out late. But nonetheless,
I think nonetheless, that's it for the Big 12, Big 10. We'll blitz the ACC or be with the SEC the next time you see us. So.
We will do one of these 2 things. We appreciate you all. Please do the review thing and push the little like button. We appreciate it when people do that. And let us know what you think about this. I am EK signing off for the Devy Dose.